Alright, so now we're going to learn about hearing and balance, or equilibrium. Going through the pathway of hearing, again, you need to know what each part is and the definition and what place it has in this pathway, where it's located, and you should be able to identify the different parts on a diagram. The pinna is the earlobe. This is in the external ear. So your ear is divided into external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So the pinna is part of the external ear. Sound travels through the external ear, through the ear canal, the external acoustic meatus, and eventually hits the tympanic membrane. From here, the sound waves enter into the middle ear, and this middle ear is typically filled with air. But if a person has an ear infection, otitis media, this can fill up with fluid, which dampens the movement and dampens the sound that's heard in this region or in this ear. For children that get chronic ear infections, one of the solutions to having fluid accumulating in this area is to put a tiny little tube. And all the tube does is it pops through the tympanic membrane and it drains the middle ear so that the fluid starts leaking out into the ear canal instead of accumulating inside of here, which builds up pressure and prevents the child from being able to hear. This is especially important during speech development because the child needs to learn how sounds are made and formed and needs to learn how to talk properly. And since they haven't really learned this yet, when they get tubes, it's usually to help with speech development. But anyways, so now we're in the middle ear, and we have 3 bones. These are the tiniest bones in the body, and they're known as ossicles. The ossicles include the malleus, incus, and stapes. Another thing that you'll see in the middle ear is this Eustachian tube. If you've ever been on an airplane or traveled into regions of various altitudes, you may have your ears popped. Well, this Eustachian tube attempts to equalize the pressure in the middle ear to the external environment. So if you go into higher altitudes where the pressure is a lot lower, you have a lot of this pressure inside of here, but the environment has lower pressure. So air wants to go out to equalize with the pressure of the atmosphere. So there's little muscles in here that will expand open and then slam shut. So what you're actually hearing pop is the slamming of your muscles on top of each other. If you go into an area of lower, so like lower than sea level, or if you're in an airplane and you come back down to ground level, so you're increasing the pressure around you, and when you increase the pressure wants to go back into the ear, so pressure is going to rush up into this tube, and again that muscle is going to open and then smack shut. So you're hearing the muscle slapping on another muscle when you hear that popping sound. There are also tiny voluntary muscles that are attached to the ossicles. If you know that something's going to be loud, you can kind of cringe and you can voluntarily control these. And that will dampen the amount of sound that is heard in the ear. So let's say you're walking up to a building where the roof is being replaced and you see this huge box of new roofing shingles, and you're watching this box get closer and closer to the edge, and it's kind of sliding down toward the edge of the roof, and then all of a sudden you see it slip and you know it's going to fall to the ground and make a super loud noise. You can cringe and you can voluntarily contract these muscles and it'll dampen the amount of sound that you hear. Try it. Try cringing your ears a little bit and dampening sound. So from this middle ear, the stapes is going to push in on the oval window. And when the stapes pushes in on the oval window, the sound waves are going to travel into the cochlea. And the cochlea looks like a snail shell inside, but the sound waves are going to travel down until they reach an area in the cochlea that has the appropriate frequency. And when it reaches that area, the sound waves are going to resonate here, causing the organ of Corti to move slightly, and the hair cells in that region will bend. The bending of the hair cell is a mechanical compression of those receptors. So this is why it's a mechanoreceptor that's sensing this. The hair cell bending sends the signal up the cochlear nerve to the brainstem, the thalamus, and eventually the temporal lobe for the interpretation of sound. Homeostatic imbalances include otitis or otitis media, which is an ear infection. If you remember, the otic region is the ear, itis is inflammation. Presbycusis is a loss of hearing with age. Tinnitus is the high-pitched ringing in the ears, which increases in age. When you hear that super high-pitched beep, that's the last time you'll ever hear that noise. What happened was the hair cell in the distal region of the cochlea has fallen over and died. So that hair cell will never fire again. Now there's other hair cells in the area that will sense that particular pitch of sound, but that one that fell over and caused that ringing sound is now dead, and it won't be replaced, and that's going to increase as you age. Please take some time to watch the video on hearing that I posted. Seeing that visual really helps people understand how hearing works. So now we're going to talk a little bit about equilibrium. So we already said that balance is controlled by the cerebellum, but it's also controlled by specific regions within the inner ear. So the sense of balance is controlled by the semicircular canals and vestibule. I want to go back to a general picture of the ear so that you can see where this is happening. So here you can see the cochlea is this snail-like structure, and there's a cochlear nerve that connects to the vestibulocochlear nerve, and that's one of the cranial nerves that enters right into the brain. But this region here, these are the semicircular canals and the vestibule. So this bottom part is part of the pathway of hearing, but this top part is responsible for balance. So inside of that top part, the vestibule and the semicircular canals, we have particular regions that contain the accessory neurons that are going to support different types of equilibrium. First, we're going to talk about static equilibrium. Static equilibrium simply talks about head position. Is your head right side up or is it bent down? This is regulated by the maculae on the vestibule. So when you are standing straight up, the maculae are not compressing any of the nerves. They're sitting right on top of these nerve ends, and your nerves can tell that this is right on top, so your head is upright. If you bend over, this goo-like substance is going to ooze down and pull on these nerves, and that's going to send, or on these neurons, and that's going to send a signal to the brain that your head is now tilted to one side or the other. So this is dependent on the gravitational pull, and that causes the hairs to get pulled. Gravitational pull. So this is the equilibrium that you lose if you travel into outer space. Dynamic equilibrium has to do with your overall body position, and this is regulated by the crista ampullaris on the semicircular canals. This crista ampullaris kind of looks like the flame of a candle, and this thing can move back and forth, side to side, all over the place. If you sit in a chair that spins and you start spinning your body around in that chair, and you're spinning and spinning and spinning, and you're getting dizzy and dizzy and dizzy, and then all of a sudden you stop yourself suddenly, even though your body has stopped, your head still feels like it's spinning around in a circle. And that's due to these. Just because your body stops doesn't mean that these have stopped. So these are going to continue to rotate for a period of time after your body has stopped. This is an example of how it works. So in equilibrium, where you're not moving around in circles, this thing sits straight on top of these neurons. But if you start spinning, this thing's going to start spinning, and that's going to send a signal to the brain that you are spinning. And then if you stop or move body position again, there's chemicals that are going to interact with this that are going to tell your brain that you've stopped or that you're still moving. So that's dynamic equilibrium. It's kind of overall body movement.